house birds, we had escapees, we had 150 meat birds that could not stop eating themselves to death. 2 weeks into using our brand new mobile chicken coop, and I'm going to give you the honest, unfiltered truth about every obstacle we faced and every solution we came up with, and if this investment was really worth it. Hi, and welcome back to Whitetail Acres Farm. If you saw our recent video, you know we just took a big leap. We went from running smaller mobile coops that we were moving every single day to this new coop. That's a large-scale mobile range coop built to handle big batches of birds on pasture. And the whole reason we made this jump is because we're scaling up. We're running 150 meat birds in this batch, and the old system just wasn't going to cut it anymore. With the smaller tractors, water was a daily chore. We were hauling jugs out across the field every single morning. Feed was also manual, and moving those coops, well, while they were manageable, it was adding up fast in time and labor. At a certain point, you have to ask yourself, is the cost of time really worth it? Or do I invest in a system that does the heavy lifting for me? So we made the call. We got this MRC250 mobile coop on the field, got the birds in, and let me walk you through exactly what those first 2 weeks look like, the good and the not so good. Now let's talk about water, because this is one of the reasons why we decided to invest in this coop. Now inside this mobile coop, there is this very large 70-gallon auto dispensing water container, and it just auto dispenses the water to every single water here inside the coop. There's no manual, carrying buckets across the field to get to the coop. There's no filling water jugs every single day. We just fill this pretty much once a week, and then the birds just have fresh water 24/7. But the system is only as good as how you keep it topped off. So here's what we set up. We have a large IBC tote sitting on a flatbed trailer. We pull the tractor right up alongside the coop. We've got a 1-inch gas-powered water pump with a custom fitting that connects directly to the line that goes into the coop. And we just pump it full. The whole thing takes about 10 minutes, if that. And we're only doing it once a week. Now think about that, once a week, compared to what we were doing before, hauling jugs out every single day across the field. That time adds up fast, especially when you've got everything else going on around a farm. The water system alone has paid for itself in labor savings in these first 2 weeks. It is so fast and easy, and honestly, it might be one of my favorite parts of the whole setup. Now, here's where things got real. The feed system, and it was the biggest learning curve for the whole first 2 weeks. Now this mobile coop has an automatic feeder with a timer, and in theory you're supposed to just set the times that you want, and then walk away and let the timer auto feed the birds. In theory, it's great, but in practice, we had to really earn our way to the right times. So for the first few days, we had the feeding schedule of 12 hours on and 12 hours off, which is what we've always done in the past. And after the first few days, we noticed that the chickens weren't really looking right. They were just looking overly full and bloated and very uncomfortable. So if you know anything about chickens, you know what the problem is right there. Now meat birds, they just aren't wired like regular chickens. Their stomachs don't have that off switch that other birds do. So if you'd let them, they'll just sit there and literally eat themselves to death. And we learned that the hard way. We lost a few birds in those first days because they were just growing way too fast, too quickly. Their hearts couldn't keep up with the rate that their bodies were growing and developing, and it was a tough thing to deal with, but it was a wake-up call. So we pulled back the timer to 10 hours, watched them closely, but still some birds were looking a little too fuller than we wanted. So we pulled it back to 8 hours. And that's where we are right now, 8 hours of feed per day. The birds look better. They're moving more. They're out, grazing and foraging on the grass in between feedings. And we haven't lost any more birds since the adjustment. So fingers crossed, I think we nailed it. The lesson here, automated feeders are a huge convenience, but with meat birds especially, you can't just set it and forget it. You've got to watch your flock, read what you're seeing, and be willing to adjust. Give yourself a few days to a week to really dial in that timer for your birds. Now let's talk about the predator protection, because predators are the one thing that keeps every poultry farmer up at night. And it almost became a real problem for us too. After the first few nights, we would go out and check on the birds in the morning, and we would find a handful of them huddled outside of the coop. They had pushed their way under the flexible rubber flap at the base of the door and gotten out. And while they were sitting out there in the open, in the dark, they could have been easily picked off by a hawk or any other predator that came through. We've talked to neighbors who have lost entire flocks because of hawks. An entire flock gone. So we don't really take this lightly. So what we really rely on is this Premier One electric poultry netting that goes around the entire coop. And that's on 24/7, and it gives us a lot of confidence and peace of mind. However, we still had to address that escapee problem that we were having. The fix? 2 long wood boards from our scrap pile. We just propped them up against the rubber flap on the inside of the coop, acting like a barrier so the birds can't push through it. It's not a fancy solution, but it worked immediately. No more escapees. No more birds sitting out in the dark, and combined with the electric fence, we're sleeping through the night without worrying about what's out there. Every day we're moving this coop to fresh grass. And if you've never seen this done with a large mobile range coop and 150 birds, it's a little bit of a production. Ryan drives the tractor and pulls the coop forward to the new section of pasture. While he does that, I'm actually inside the coop, walking down the middle, shooing the birds to the back so that nobody gets caught under the frame as it moves. You're watching both sides at once, keeping them moving in the right direction. It takes a little bit of coordination. The first few days, we were only doing half moves because at that time, the birds were still pretty small. They were pretty much staying around just the one half of the coop, which was perfect. And so they weren't soiling a whole lot. So we just had to do half moves. But by the end of the first week, we were up to full moves every single day. And it's gotten really fast and easy. It only takes a few minutes. And us and the birds have gotten into a nice rhythm. So that way, they pretty much know what we're going to do. We still have to encourage them a little bit. But they just move on ahead onto the fresh grass, immediately plop down. They just spread out and start really enjoying all of that fresh grass that's underneath them. There's something really satisfying about watching 150 meat birds hit a brand new section of pasture. They go straight for the green shoots, and that's exactly what the system is designed for, and you can see it working. The ventilation system is one thing that really exceeded our expectations. On a nice warm day like today, you can have both sides fully open and allow a nice cross breeze to run through the interior of the coop, really making the chickens comfortable. And then if we have a cool night or some rain, all we have to do is roll it down, and then the birds can stay nice and comfortable and safe inside. And it gives us so much flexibility with the weather. So the birds aren't stressed out. They're not panting because they're too hot. They're not bunched together because they're too cold. They're just spread out, happy, and comfortable. And that's what we want for them. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough with the mobile coops. What happens to the land after the birds move off? We've been going back and looking at the sections they vacated, and the grass is already responding to the natural fertilization. This is the regenerative farming piece. The birds are improving the pasture as they go. They're not just utilizing the land, they're building it. That matters a lot to us, and it's a big part of why we made this investment. So if we were starting the whole thing over, knowing what we know now, first, we'd start the feed timer at 8 hours a day on day 1. Don't go to 12. With meat birds, you want to limit their access from the start. Those first few days of trial and error cost us a couple birds and some stress that we could have avoided. Second, although we did do a thorough walk around of the coop before the first night to look for any gaps and any areas the birds could exploit, we did not take that rubber flap into consideration. We should have caught that during the setup walkthrough. It should have been a red flag. So check everything before dark and take every scenario into consideration. Third, and this one is more of a confirmation than a change, the IBC tote water setup is non-negotiable for this scale. If you're running 150 birds, figure out your bulk water solution before your birds hit the ground. Don't improvise on the fly. We've got about 3 more weeks with this batch before harvest, and we'll be doing a full breakdown as to whether this investment made sense and whether the numbers actually pencil out the way we'd hoped. So stay tuned for that one, because I know a lot of you are thinking about this system for your own operation, and you deserve the full honest picture, not just a highlight reel. So all in all, our first 2 weeks have been a very successful, and I would say humbling, learning curve. The water system works fantastic. It's a game changer. The feeding system also works well, but it does require some attention, especially for meat birds. And the predator protection is solid as long as you make sure that you look for any possible gaps. And then the moves that we make are very smooth and easy, and us and the meat birds are getting used to it, so that's going very well. So the real question, was this investment really worth it? And I'd say yes. After 2 weeks of use, we would definitely recommend it to anybody who would ask us. But the final answer is going to come in a few weeks once these birds are harvested and we have the total cost per bird picture and we know what the actual return was. And I know you're going to want to watch that, so hit subscribe and follow along so you can see the full rundown once we're finished with this batch. If you've run a large-scale pastured poultry operation, or you've been thinking about making the jump to a mobile coop, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What system are you using, and what's been your biggest challenge? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more of our mobile coop journey, along with all of our other farm adventures. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one.